What's going on, guys? Tyler here from Audioholics Anonymous, and today I bring to you the first episode in my revamped Wrong Opinion series. Now, if you've stuck around with the channel for a hot minute, then you might know that we had a series called Wrong Opinion in the past. Well, Logan and I had sat down and talked about that and realized that those videos didn't really measure up to our quality standards. Now, we are obviously not like the milestone of quality on YouTube or anything. We don't make the best videos on the platform, but the videos weren't fun to watch. They were too long, they were too ranty, they meandered around too much. They weren't fun to make, so we decided to cut them, and maybe we will redo those episodes at some point separately. But for now, I bring to you the ranking of the entire discography of King Crimson, of the studio albums, I should say, no live albums or EPs or anything like that. So before I get into that, I just want to preface this by saying that this is entirely my opinion. So if you disagree, please put your thoughts, your ranking, into the comments section below. I would love to read that, because King Crimson, in my prep for this video, I found is a band that people don't really agree on what's the best, what's the worst in their discography. In a band, like, everybody agrees Saint Anger or Lulu is the worst Metallica album. Everybody more or less agrees that Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, that's the best Metallica album. You know, that is not the case with King Crimson. Not even remotely. So, everybody has different opinions. So, just respect mine, and I will respect yours, and that's all I ask. Alright, so let's get right into it. Now, keep in mind, before I list this least favorite album of mine in their discography, that I don't think any King Crimson album is explicitly bad. I think most King Crimson albums would rank above an 8 out of 10, a 4 out of 5, what have you. But for the sake of this video, to make it, like, not boring, I'm going to have to give some albums a lesser score, so not every album is like 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5, you know what I mean? So, keep that in mind, but notable exception, this last album, 1984's Three of a Perfect Pair. I did not like this album. I do not understand the appeal of this album. There's not a single song on this album that I remember. I looked at the track listing 2 minutes before I started this video, and I don't remember a single song that I read on that track list. It is not a good record. It's disappointing, really, because you had the 1-2 punch of beat and discipline, and then they close off this trilogy of 80s King Crimson albums with Three of a Perfect Pair, and it just doesn't land. It's just, they end the trilogy with a and that's a shame. It's a shame. I feel like it makes those albums lesser just by existing. Okay, I'm being a little hyperbolic. It's not that bad, but it's very disappointing for me, especially considering it has the third part of Larks, Tongues, and Aspic here. And it's easily the worst part of the quadrilogy. It's the worst part easily. I don't remember any motif from that song. It's not interesting. It's not experimental in any interesting way. This album meanders around like our old Wrong Opinion videos. It goes on too long. I didn't enjoy this album. I will give this album a 2.5 out of 5. So next we have 1995's Thrack. Now, I enjoyed this one a lot more than Three of a Perfect Pair, but it's definitely not a fantastic album. It's got a very different sound from Three of a Perfect Pair, because Three of a Perfect Pair came out in 1984, and over 10 years later, Thrack was the next King Crimson album. It was a very lengthy hiatus, and so they came back, and it's heavier. It just sounds different, you know? Like, Three of a Perfect Pair, Beat and Discipline are very synthy, they're more new wavy. That's thrown out the window with Thrack. It does not sound like an 80s new wave album even remotely. It doesn't even have the footprints or the fingerprints of that sort of music in there. It's very, very different. Dinosaur is pretty much the only memorable song on the album. It is a little bit disappointing, but it's at least better than Three of a Perfect Pair. I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. So next we have 2000's Construction with a K. Yes, it's spelled with a K. Not in the beginning, though, in the middle of the word. I know that's just really annoying to me, too. So, Construction of Light. I hate it. This record, I think, is essentially Thrack done correctly. It's more memorable, it's more interesting, the songwriting is better. I still wouldn't consider it a fantastic record. It is a little bit long-winded, maybe a little too self-indulgent at times, but it does conclude the Lark's Tongues and Aspic quadrilogy, and the final part is amazing. I love it. This is a great album. If you need to throw in a King Crimson album you haven't heard before, but you're kind of sick of their earlier stuff, throw this on. I don't think you'll be disappointed in it. It's a very fair record, and I give it a 3.5 out of 5. So next, I list the 2003 album, The Power to Believe. Now, this is kind of weird, because it's heavier than Thrack and Construction of Light. It is actually more prog metal-y, and that might be because it's like around the time Tool came out, so maybe Fripp and co. are being a little bit influenced by Tool and maybe some Dream Theater, but it comes out really great. It still has that stamp of King Crimson essence in the music, and there's some great songs on here. The Power to Believe quadrilogy is fantastic, and also Happy with What You Have to Be Happy With is a great message and a great song. Just a really good album, and I give it a 3.75 out of 5. So next, we have 1981's Discipline. Now, there was again a lengthy hiatus between, I believe Red was the last one. Red came out in 1974, and then Discipline 1981. So quite a lengthy hiatus between albums for King Crimson again. And there's just a hugely different sound on here compared to the stuff they've done before. I mentioned earlier it's more synthy, more new wavy, more like art rock than the sort of progressive experimental stuff that they've done in the past. Very different sound, but it works really well. And I think that's just a testament to the fact that the genius behind the band, Robert Fripp, is King Crimson. No matter the billions of lineup changes, Robert Fripp is the mastermind, and he's the one that makes King Crimson sound like King Crimson, regardless of the genre they're playing in. I believe that the band could play essentially any style, and it would still sound great. I will say that I don't prefer this to the classic Crimson sound, but it's still a great record. I still vastly recommend it. It's great. So next, I have 1970's Lizard. This is easily my least favorite of the sort of classic era of King Crimson, the more proggy experimental stuff. It's my least favorite by far. I think it has a much more jazzy, ethereal sound to it when compared to previous works, and even the works that come after this, Red, Lark's Tongues and Aspic, and Islands, and of course Starless and Bible Black. It just sounds very different to those albums. But it's still a great record, and there's some great music on here. Just beware that it does sound quite different. It's much more jazzy. I give this album a 4.25 out of 5. So next, I have 1982's Beat, which is the second in the trilogy of albums in the 80s, Discipline, Beat, and finally, Three of a Perfect Pair. And Beat is my favorite easily. It's the one that I had the most fun with. I think it was the most interesting and experimental record in the trilogy of albums. And there's a surprising amount of variety packed in its, again, surprisingly short runtime. It's not a very long album. It's not a very long album considering King Crimson's discography, but it is probably the record I will reach for the most in that trilogy of 80s King Crimson albums. I recommend it a lot. It's great. So next we have 1970's In the Wake of Poseidon, which was their second record that they released right after In the Court of the Crimson King. And it kind of shows, because this album basically just sounds like In the Court of the Crimson King again. Like, to the point where the first song kind of sounds like it's very similar to 21st Century Schizoid Man, and it kind of goes on from there in a very similar way to In the Court of the Crimson King, which is, I think, why sometimes this album is excluded or forgotten about, but I think that's a shame, because though it might not be as good as In the Court of the Crimson King, it's still great. It's still an amazing, experimental, fun album. Really memorable songwriting and great compositions on this record. So, if you listen to In the Court of the Crimson King and you want more of that, do give In the Wake of Poseidon a chance, because it's better than a lot of people tell you it is. So next we have 1971's Islands, and this is the record. Oh, I'm sorry, I almost forgot. In the Wake of Poseidon gets a 4.5 out of 5. So, Islands. It's a great record. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, because it's essentially, from what I was listening to, essentially it's just, it's Lizard but done right. It's Lizard but a little better. I feel like the songwriting is more memorable. Islands itself is one of the best songs the band ever made. It's a great record. Totally recommend it. And I give this one a 4.5 out of 5. So now we're on to the creme of the crop. And unfortunately, I cannot, in good conscience, say these albums aren't as good as they are with the ratings. So the last 4 King Crimson albums are all 5 out of 5. You don't like it? I'm sorry, this is my video. And these albums are more or less perfection. They are some of the best records I have ever listened to, with some of the best compositions, the best songwriting, the best lyrics, the best musicality. These albums are just some of the best things that music has ever done for anybody. So, with that out of the way, I'll start with my least favorite of the 4, Lark's Tongues and Aspic. Please don't shoot me. I'm sorry. It's by far the most proggy album King Crimson has ever done, and probably will ever do. It's incredibly well written, though, and if you can handle the mind-meltingly complicated music, this album is probably going to be your favorite. The only reason it's not for me is because I feel that because it's so mind-meltingly complex all the time, it suffers a bit in terms of memorable songs when compared to the 3 albums above it. I'm nitpicking, of course, but I've got to put these in some sort of order. So 1973's Lark's Tongues and Aspic is going to be number 4. So going on, we have 1969's In the Court of the Crimson King, which used to be my favorite album of all time. I know, it's insane that it's number 3 and not even 2 or 1 now. This is an all-time classic. I talked a bit about it earlier. It started the prog rock scene in the 70s. It's one of the most influential and well-written records of all time. Every song on this album is amazing. 21st Century Schizoid Man, what a classic. Sampled in a Kanye West song, copied by hundreds of people. Just an amazing track. Epitaph, what a memorable, melancholic song. I Talk to the Wind, very spacey, progressive venture. Just an amazing record. Just so good. If you're a fan of music, I would say the top 4 you need to listen to, but especially this one. You owe yourself to listen to this album at least once in your life. So, moving on, 1974's Red. Now, if you go back and watch my King Crimson video, you'll see that I actually preferred In the Court of the Crimson King to Red, and I would say that it's been a slow grower for me. The more I've listened to it, the more I enjoy it, the more it moves up my list, and now it's finally surpassed In the Court of the Crimson King. I absolutely love this record. The instrumental opening is fantastic and memorable. Then you've got Fallen Angel, Providence, and my favorite King Crimson song of all time, Starless. It's just an amazing masterpiece. And that's what all 4 of these albums are, by the way, masterpieces. So, there's only one album left, and it might surprise some people to know that it's 1974's Starless and Bible Black. This is just an insane record. I think it does everything that Lark's Tongues and Aspect did, but it also does everything Red and In the Court of Crimson King did. It's the best of both worlds. It has the memorable songs with great melodies and great lyrics. It has the complex music. It's got the experimental music. The title track is one of the best songs in their discography, and honestly, all the songs on this album are killer from front to back. Amazingly produced, amazingly performed. The sheer musicality displayed on this album is just insane. I love it, and it is my favorite King Crimson record, although I should once again reiterate, these top 4 really could be anywhere, honestly. The reason they're in the order they are is just preference. So that is my ranking of the King Crimson discography. Did you enjoy this video? Please let me know. This is a different format for me. I put a little bit more effort into the editing, adding in the pictures and the ratings and so on and so forth. So yeah, tell me what you think in the comments below. And without further ado, I bid you audio do. Bye-bye.